In many countries, religious freedom is not a concept, it is a question of survival. For simply belonging to the wrong religion, countless numbers of people have been killed, many others have disappeared, and still more have been imprisoned indefinitely. Researching over a 2-year period, from 2016 to 2018, Aid to the Church in Need's Global Religious Freedom in the World report seeks to highlight areas of the world where religious persecution limits the rights of individuals to practice their faith and indicates the improvement or decline of religious freedom in each country. Analyzing 196 countries, the report finds evidence of significant religious freedom violations in 38 nations. Within these, the situation for minority groups in the last 2 years has worsened in 18 countries, almost half. In many of these top violators, including North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Eritrea, the situation was already so bad it could scarcely get any worse. Religious freedom conditions improved in only 2 countries, Iraq and Syria, both top offenders in 2016. An emerging trend is the crackdown on religious freedom from a growing number of authoritarian regimes around the world. This aggressive nationalism, hostile to religious minorities, has worsened to the degree that the phenomenon can be called ultranationalism. Among these, India is particularly significant, report after report highlighting egregious acts of violence against religious minorities, notably Christians and Muslims, reveals the emergence of a particularly aggressive form of Hindu nationalism called Hindutva. In China, the communist government has taken renewed steps over the past 2 years to crack down on faith groups perceived as resistant to the communist authorities. In Myanmar, in September 2017, the nationalist Buddhist regime started a major military offensive against the Rohingya Muslims, driving over 700,000 people to neighboring Bangladesh, joining the 200,000 already refuged there. Religious nationalism has provoked a growing intolerance against religious minorities in Russia and Kyrgyzstan, resulting in degrading of their classification to the category of discrimination. In Turkey too, in response to the failed July 2016 coup, minority faith groups have increasingly come under renewed pressure. Although the military threat from radical Islamic groups including ISIS and Al-Qaeda has declined in Iraq and Syria since 2016, the mentality is still prevalent, continuing to threaten the religious minorities and, through the resulting refugee crisis, the stability of neighboring countries. The threat from fundamentalist Islam has since spread to other countries. For example, in Africa, where a new front of Islamic fundamentalism, supported in part by Arab states, is erupting with devastating consequences for religious minorities, notably Christians. During the period under review, there are, however, glimmers of hope. The loss of territory seized by extremist groups in Syria and Iraq mirror similar losses experienced by other radical groups like Boko Haram in northern Nigeria, as well as a sharp decline in militant Islamist violence in both Tanzania and Kenya. The stability afforded by the military defeat of these groups has allowed religious minority groups to consider returning to their homes. In Iraq, for example, as of June 2018, reports show that almost 50% of the total number of people who had fled from Qaraqosh had returned to the town. While Islamic fundamentalism has been pushed back in some regions, in others it has expanded. The report reveals an upsurge of terrorist attacks in the West, most notably in Europe. As these attacks demonstrate, the threat posed by extremism has now become universal, imminent, and ever-present. As such, this threat named in the report as neighborhood fundamentalism risks to create a culture of suspicion and distrust, potentially fracturing once harmonious societies. Despite evidence to the growing threat of religious fundamentalism around the world, to date, little has been done to convert words of concern into an agenda to defend and uphold religious liberty. The facts in the report show that there is a barrier of indifference, behind which the suffering of religious minority goes largely unnoticed. Religious illiteracy and apathy blinds the West to the surge in persecution perpetrated by a growing ultranationalism and extremism against minority faith groups. As Cardinal Dieudonné Zapalenga, Archbishop of Bangui, stated, "Either we succeed in restoring peace, or we will disappear. And this is only possible if religious freedom is understood, accepted, and upheld."